Yo everyone, today I'm going to be teaching you all about the ride height settings in F1 2025 and how to set them up for maximum performance, maximum consistency, and also extracting a little bit more straight line speed with the optimal settings along the way. So these are broken down into front ride height and rear ride height as well. Very powerful tools in that individual rides, and for very different reasons you can work out and feel and optimize them to the perfect settings along the way. So let's jump into the garage here. We're on time trial at Hungary because Hungary has many different styles of turns: high speed, low speed, also high G-force corners, also corners with big curbings and big bumps as well. So really has to force you to think about the ride height setting to optimize it for the track. So we've just taken the world record setup at the moment. As you can see, it has 21 on the front and 44 on the rear. As a good rule of thumb to get into, 20 and between 22 is a good window of operation to be running with the front ride height. Of course, you could be adjusting that slightly downwards on some very specific tracks, but as a good rule of thumb, between 20 and 22 is a good way to feel and a good balance to have with that front ride height. But what we're going to do to make the video complete and just to show you all different examples, we're going to minimize that front ride height and show you in a very extreme way what happens if the front ride height is too low and the key signs that you can be looking for and how you can feel it in your own driving as well. A very key indication that the front ride height is too low is the car is going to be extremely slow at top speed. So as we get to the curbing on the left hand side, we are driving at 192 miles an hour, as you can just see on the steering wheel at the bottom of the screen. The reason that the top speed is absolutely destroyed with the front ride height being too low is simply because as the front ride height is very low, it starts scraping along the floor of the track, dragging the floor of the car as well. That generates friction, and that friction is of course not optimizing the acceleration of the car, and it's not allowing you to accelerate as easily as you should be able to do. There's a really key thing here though. If you can get the ride height lower and lower and lower and optimize it, then it's going to be in the perfect window to give you the maximum grip. The key situation here is as low as possible, but without the front ride height scraping on the floor, as if it's scraping on the floor on the straights, it's also going to be costing you probably quite a lot around the corners. The reason I say probably, because of course in a low speed corner, the front ride height is not as compressed because the downforce isn't forcing the car into the road, whereas on a high speed corner it is. So of course there's a lot of variations here and a lot of situations to think about when you're optimizing the front ride height. As I said earlier though, between 20 and 22 is a good rule of thumb to be running with. So now what we're going to do is run back up to 21, where the world record setup was originally at before we did the test. And remember, we got 192 miles an hour down the pit straight before we reset it to 21. Previous test was on 15 front ride height, and now we're back on the 21 front ride height. So going down the straight, we've already reached 192, hitting the curb at the left hand side, and we're at 196 miles an hour. 4 miles an hour is night and day difference and is huge in optimizing the car. So now that we've done that, and now that I've outbroken myself and almost sent myself into the wall, Jesus. Anyway, getting back on the track, there's a second variation to that front ride height that you really want to optimize. So first of all, if you're looking to get that front ride height spot on, I recommend optimizing it down the straight and finding the setting that is going to be not dragging the front ride height across the floor, and then you can get a good baseline to work with. The second optimization is checking that you can get up and over all the necessary curves that you need to around the circuit. For example, in Hungaroring, these curves are very big, but also can gain you a lot of lap time potential if you're able to drive up and over them versus having to drive around them. This also helps with consistency, because if you have more track to use, then your sensitivity to mistakes is going to go down. Whereas if you have to be on a very specific racing line, that can be quite hard to do time after time after time again. So as you can see, just go for the chicane, able to attack the curbs, and the car stayed very stable in this situation. Now we're just going to do a replay mode and show you what it's like if we have to drive around the curbing. It's not the end of the world, right? But it's still not as optimal. And you can see we have to slow down the car quite a lot to make sure that the car is able to absorb the curbing as well by not going over the top of it. Additionally, it just helps open up different parts of the track if you have the correct front ride height. So, to summarize the front ride height, key indications to make sure you get it in a good rule of thumb and a good approach is check the front ride height, make sure that you're getting optimal top speed down the straight, and then the second test you want to do is making sure that the car is still consistent, fast, and confidence building when you're going over the big curbs around the track. That's going to be the front ride height wrapped up, and now we're going to move up into the rear ride height of the car as well. So the rear ride height on F1 2025 really plays a minimal role in top speed, to be honest. It should, in my opinion, play more of a role, but the drag effect and the friction effect of the rear ride height is not really doing much, to be honest, if anything at all. So, as long as the rear ride height is not over-compressing in high-speed corners, what I'll show you some examples of later on in the video, and you're able to get over the curbings very similar to the front ride height in an efficient way, then you can run the rear ride height as low as you can go. So what we're going to do is now minimize the rear ride height, and we're going to show you some examples of how it might look like if you're over-compressing the rear ride height in the high-speed corners, and why this might be making the car not a nice balance to be driving. It becomes very snappy, very unpredictable, and something that's very difficult to be working with to build confidence, to be honest. Especially with the modern Formula 1 tyres, if you overstress them, overslide them in a high-speed corner, you will overheat them pretty much immediately. So if you do have too low on the rear ride height and the rear of the car is very unpredictable and sliding around like this, you know, it's just going to overheat the tires and you're going to lose more grip because of that. But speaking about the example from before with compressing the rear ride height and getting it through high-speed corners, as you can see here in Turn 4 Hungary is a perfect example of that. It's a high-speed corner combined with a big curb usage on the inside. So what we're going to do is go into third-person camera once we get up to the crest of the hill, go into the corner, and now you can see we're just going to remove the HUD. Just put that there, and now go into third-person camera. Lovely jubbly. So as you can see, the right-hand side of the car is lower than the left-hand side of the car. The reason for that is the weight transfer is pushing the weight of the car to the right-hand side. Of course, this is unloading the left-hand side of the car as well. So whenever you turn left, the right-hand side of the car gets weighted, and whenever you turn right, the left-hand side of the car gets weighted. The reason that this is really important, as you can see, with the compression of the springs, it's pushing down the floor of the car. And of course, the floor of the car is a solid object, so even if the left-hand side is slightly higher, the right-hand side of the floor can still be touching and stopping the airflow under the car. The reason the airflow underneath the car is so important is with modern ground effect Formula 1 cars, but even without ground effect Formula 1 cars, but speaking about ground effect, of course, because that's what's in this year's iteration of the Formula 1 game, you are relying on a constant airflow underneath the car. If that airflow gets stalled for whatever reason, the floor touching the ground, the curbing touching the floor, but any reason that airflow gets stalled, you are losing a significant amount of downforce, as quite simply that airflow is sucking the car down to the road. So if the airflow is stalled, you lose that suction effect, and that is simply just going to be costing you a lot of grip and a lot of stability in that moment until the airflow is resumed. This is why I got a snap of oversteer going up and over the crest of the hill, because the floor of the car had compressed against the curbing, and that is meaning that we are going to be losing the stability because the airflow was stalled in that moment, thus meaning little grip. As soon as the airflow returned to the car, as you could see, we was able to catch it and continue on our merry way. Just to play this in full so you can see it in detail as well. Before touching the curb, we had grip. When we touched the curb, we ran out of grip because the airflow was stalled underneath the car. Once the airflow had reinitiated itself, then we have grip again, and it's good to go. So over the curb, lovely jubbly. As soon as the airflow starts again, we have grip. So If you find yourself in high-speed corners or going over curbings that the rear of the car is quite unsettled and sliding around in this type of way, then you are probably too low on the rear ride height, and I would recommend going up in steps of 2 increments. The second example of that is when you're going through a high-speed corner, even if it doesn't have a big curb on the inside of it, such as Copse Corner is a good example of that as well around Silverstone, and we're just going to see that example played out also here in the Hungaroring. You can see going for the right-hander, and although this time it was able to stick, there was a little bit of micro sliding on the rear axle. Hard to see, because of course you're just watching from the T camera, and I have it with the feeling of the force feedback, and unfortunately force feedback can't be transmitted through the video. I wish it could, that'd be fantastic, but unfortunately it can't. Anyway, going now into the corner, as you can see, there's a little, just a tiny bit of sliding on the rear axle as we turned in. Part of that is caused by opening the corner on the outside curbing, but as you can see, the car is just sliding a little bit here right now, and it's not enough that I really need to lift the throttle, but was enough that I could feel it, and you could just about see it here as well. So in time trial, this will be fine because tire temperature, tire wear isn't enabled, but in GP mode, online mode, career mode, quite possibly you would need to up the rear ride height simply just to get that floor to be a little bit more stable with the airflow underneath it to utilize the grip in a better way. So how is that going to look as well? So we're just going to pop it back into the garage, up the rear ride height, and like I say, I recommend doing this in incremental steps of 2, because the rear ride height is quite sensitive, and it can often take quite a long time to actually find where you want to be. So for example, if you just went up in steps of 1, you did a new lap, you step of 1, did a new lap, did a new lap, did a new lap, it's going to take quite a lot of time before you actually start to dial in that force feedback. Why am I saying force feedback? Sorry, I'm speaking so quickly because I love this kind of topic, you know. And hopefully the video has been helpful so far. But anyway, I need to lock back in and get back in. We're not talking about force feedback. We're talking about rear ride height. There we go, got there in the end. So if you're going up in steps of 1, it can take a long time to actually find the optimization for that rear ride height. But if you go up in steps of 2, and then you can see now 44 and now 46, and then you say, okay, well, the step between 44 and 46, the car feels great now over the curbing. Then you can go down in a step of 1 and maybe say, well, 45 might be the perfect ride height because it's consistent, it feels good, and I'm not sliding in the high-speed corners. And by doing that, you could do more optimized changes to get to your ideal rear ride height rather than just doing steps of 1 all the time. This could just help shorten that process and get it absolutely nailed. Much like we did for the front ride height, where I gave you like a general rule of thumb to be working with, I'm going to do the same for the rear ride height. We're going to have 40 on the rear as the minimum, and that is still very good. Tracks such as, let's say, Spa, where there's not really any big curbings that you go over, then you can really optimize it and go lower, closer to 40. Tracks that have massive curbings and massive bumps, like here in Hungaroring, I would probably say maximum like 45 to go with. So yeah, the range is between 40 and 45 on that rear ride height, and then the maximum on the front ride height is of course like 22, and the minimal I would sort of recommend is going 20. Of course, in very unique situations you can start pushing that front ride height lower and lower, but it's just very unique, very hard to optimize that front ride height to that level, so that's why I say the rule of thumb between 20 and 22 is a good place to get started. So with that being said, I've been Brendon Leigh. Hopefully this video has been helpful when I wasn't speaking about force feedback and speaking about the rear ride height, in fact. Yeah, apologies for that, getting my words mixed up, but I've been speaking like non-stop for like however long this video has been recording for. But yeah, hopefully this video has been helpful, has been useful, and yeah, more tutorials coming along the way, and I plan to sort of do a similar video for every single aspect of the setup. So if you do want to try and maximize your setup, hopefully those videos will be useful for you as well. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Grazie ragazzi. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.